This session is about the Consumer Protection Act for non-lawyers. So, I mean, we know that the Act is quite a hefty document, and the question is, what do we know? How do we deal with this? Are we not lawyers? And so this session tries to look at it from a very simplified view and view from the plumber side. So my name is Herman Strauss, and I'm not a lawyer. I have been in various legal, or I've been caught up in various legal cases, however, that looked at, well, product compliance and things like that. So I had to represent the companies I worked for from a producer side, manufacturer side, test laboratory side, and so on. And it's typically not a lot of fun, but there are a few things that you can do to make sure that you're safe, that you don't have to be concerned about the legal side. It's not something to lose sleepless nights about. So what's the objective of our session tonight, this morning? So our objective is to get a general understanding of the Act so that you know when you need help and where to find it. That's the basics. As I said, this is a simplification to try and help give you some of the principles that you need to know. And based on that principles, it might drive you to get actual legal advice from a legal expert when necessary. Now, when we start with this, I want to encourage you to think about this from two sides. Which side of the line are you on? Are you the consumer, or are you the supplier? Are you the person that have to, or is there a consumer that might take you on for non-compliance to the Consumer Act? Or are you the consumer that need to take on somebody else or that need to comply? This thinking help you to understand the different requirements when we do discuss that in the Act and so on. So always everything we discuss, think about it from the two sides. I'm on this side of the line, I'm on that side of the line. That helps create a better understanding. And frankly, you might find yourself on either side of that line in various circumstances. So the first starting point is the image on your screen at the moment. That is the Act. I want to firstly encourage you to please get hold of a copy of this Act. Yes, it's a legal document. It's written in legal language, but it's not that difficult. The majority of this is fairly easy to understand. So if you do a simple Google search for CPA or Consumer Protection Act in South Africa, there are various sites where you can get hold of this thing. Get it, use it as a reference. Do some scanning through the document, and especially after today's session, you might have a slightly better idea of how to understand this. So this Act was introduced in 2009, as you can say, 29 April 2009. It was introduced. It's commonly referred to as the Consumer Protection Act or the CPA. And prior to this Act, all of these cases were handled in common law. So there weren't a dedicated Act to look at the consumer rights or at consumer protection. So the common law took care of that. It brings up the question, why was it necessary in the first place to create the Act then? Why was it, if there were legislation in place, why write a specific law for that? And the simple reason is dishonesty. I mean, there were so many, the consumers at the wrong end of this, were on the wrong end of the law. They had the wrong end of the stick. I mean, just one scenario that I recall from early 2000s, especially, you'd go out, you're looking for a specific item, you find a nice cheap one, buy it. If you used it today, at the end of the day, it already breaks. If you go back to the shop and you'd say, you know what, no ways, this thing doesn't work. They say, whoa, you bought the cheapie, what were you thinking? What made you think it's going to last more than a day? I mean, that's not reasonable. And it's those type of situations that I think all of us experience. That's just one example of it. That created the need for the Consumer Protection Act. We can list a whole range of other examples as well. Frankly, I think it's sad that it was ever necessary to create the act like this. That there were so much misleading things, so much dishonesty out in the industry, in the various industries. I'm not referring to plumbing at all. Well, plumbing only, I refer to everything. So can you summarize the CPA? Do you think it's possible to give a simple, quick summary of the Consumer Protection Act? I mean, what is in the Act? And I'd like to say, you know what? You can do it with very, very few words. What the Act simply says, don't lie and be honest. If you follow these rules, no problem, you'll be safe. You don't have to worry about getting caught on the wrong side of the Consumer Protection Act. That's the basic summary. But remember, be honest is it's not a technical term. You know, when you, I mean, we often say, okay, fine, I didn't lie, but you didn't ask me for this information, and therefore I wasn't obliged to give you this information. That's dishonesty. And I'm not giving you a lecture in ethics today, not at all. I'm simply using this word, well established, to explain the technicalities of the legislation, because this is what the legislation effectively say. And let's use a simple example to explain what we mean by this. So we know when you go and see a doctor and you explain whatever problem you have, and the doctor will turn around and say, you know what, I know the problem. Take this medication. Take the blue pills, green pills. Take this, it will make it all better. It doesn't work. Then you try something else, then you try something else. Eventually you end up at a different doctor. And the different doctor, somewhere along the line, have a look and say, oh, so why did you do this? Why did you take this medicine? Oh, why didn't you do this? Said, hello, I'm the patient. How should I know? I mean, this is what the doctor gave me. I've trusted the professional. I trusted the person who were supposed to take care of me. I simply don't know better. We can go to Google. You can do all the Google searches, but everybody also tells us don't search your medical condition because you don't understand. Trust your doctor. What's the result of that? If you have a look at the media at the moment, there are multiple media medical malpractice claims out there. I mean, the legal system is flooded with claims for medical malpractice. Yes, there's arguments that there are too many claims for unnecessary situations. Doesn't change the fact that it's there and it happens. Because there's an expert that needs to deliver a service. There's a consumer that needs to receive the service and doesn't understand that expertise. And well, that ends up in somewhere along the line where there's either bad service being rendered, bad information being given, in a perception or a real malpractice that gets challenged in the court of law, and millions, at the moment billions. I think the last figures I heard was 10 years ago, it was already R500 billion worth of claims in South Africa. So that's a medical example. What about plumbing? What about the plumbing environment? Does it affect us in a similar way? Now, I just have to use this cheesy line from the movie. I'm sure you can all recognize the movie, where Spider-Man's uncle told him, with great power comes great responsibility. But it's very true in our case. I mean, for a plumbing environment, the plumber is the expert in what he does. The consumer is not knowledgeable about that. All the consumer needs to knows is this problem must be solved. There should be no leak. My hot water should be there. Whatever the case might be. Understand that the plumber is the expert and will be treated as the expert in any legal situation. A quick reminder, and very pertinent to today, while we all sit at home, or most of us sit at home, I'm glad to see that a lot of plumbers can actually go out and do some work. But it has been established and has been confirmed that the coronavirus might spread through building pipes. It's been confirmed, well, internationally. This again brings the plumber, or shows the importance of the plumber. It's similar to the SARS virus outbreak previously that was spread due to bad plumbing. There are various other things how plumbing can really endanger the lives of our clients. So now you have to take into consideration plumbing has got very, very serious consequences when things go wrong. How do you think the law will look at a plumber in an environment like that, where the plumber is really the keeper of that safety? He's the expert that knows what to do to make sure that the consumer gets the service they need. So when you are faced with a situation, and let me use a specific situation that we're familiar with, you have to replace a geyser. You can see that the safety valve discharge pipe is really not adequate. It's a 15mm pipe that's too long and so on. And frankly, it's dangerous. It can cause an explosion. How much information do you give to the homeowner? Do you explain to the homeowner, or do you just say, well, the standard says it should be, you want me to fix it, yes or no? And the homeowner has to make a choice. For the homeowner, the choice is between safety and price. If you don't give the homeowner the information about the safety that they need in order to make an informed decision, they will go with price. Question is, on what side is it worth the risk? Is it worth the risk not telling the homeowner everything? Is it worth the risk? I mean, it's not about not telling the homeowner necessarily, but it's that extra effort to inform the homeowner. I mean, that one example, there are many others. Frankly, it doesn't cost a cent to comply with the Consumer Protection Act. Yes, it might cost you a few extra minutes, but it can save you a lot. If you just look at it from a selfish point of view, you cover yourself by doing that. Frankly, it's a safety, it's a benefit to the consumer if you give the consumer the proper information, and they can make informed decisions as they're supposed to. So let's look at a little bit at the Act itself. And the intention is not to start listing all sorts of requirements now, to give you just a brief overview of what is in the Act, how it fits together. Now, in the Act itself, it describes its purpose. So the purpose is, I mean, bloody, blah, you can read all of that. It's about the welfare of the consumer, and it describes the responsibilities, but let's make it simpler. And let me just give a short while. It looks like the screen is now distributed. Everybody should be seeing this now. So if you look at the area that describes the purpose, the first section is all about the purpose of the Act is to protect the consumer. That's the purpose. And to establish mechanisms to enforce it. That's quite important. It's one thing if there's an act that says you shall. It's another thing if there's a policeman that looks over your shoulder and that provides the environment that consumers that want to stand up for their rights can do so without unnecessary legal challenges or financial challenges. Since the introduction of the Consumer Protection Act, it's actually possible for consumers to do something about it when somebody is being dishonest to them. So in the Consumer Protection Act, there are 7 chapters. Interpretation, purpose, application, fundamental consumer rights. Okay, we're going to go through them all one by one now. What you need to understand out of this is the Act has got 94 pages. It's a 94-page document. So it's not a small document, but when you break it down into these things, you know what to look for when you go through it. It makes it a little bit easier. And it's like a double-spaced thing, so it's not that much text actually. So chapter 1. Interpretation, purpose, application. Why is this important? When anything in a legal environment is challenged in a court of law, the purpose of the act is important. The definitions is important. Often you use one word and people understand it, they have different understandings of it. The definition will be given in the act, say, well, anything to do with this act, this is how you will interpret it. Where there's gray areas and they say, well, I mean, when you start splitting hairs about the wording, well, this word says you shall or you may or you shouldn't or you what have you, they go back to the purpose of the legislation and say, whoa, let's look at the situation. Will this further the purpose of the law? Yes or no? Okay, why is it important to understand? Because you don't easily get away with technicalities. You have to comply with the intention of the law. If you don't comply with the intention of the law, don't hope to get away with a technicality somewhere along the line when it's challenged. Second, chapter 2 is the fundamental consumer rights. It defines the rights and there are various conditions, specific examples that's been explained there. It's quite, if you have to start there, read that. That gives you a good understanding. Then you have chapter 3 and chapter 5. Protection of consumer rights and consumers' voice and national consumer protection institutions. So this is the part that establishes the Consumer Commission, organization that you can contact for help. We'll touch on that just after this. How the rights can be enforced is discussed there, and how consumer rights interact with other legislation and organizations. Remember, it's not only the Consumer Protection Act. This might be where everything starts, but there are integration with other legislation and so on as well. And I'm not even going to try and explain that now. It's all in the Act. If you get to that point, there's enough lawyers that'll be happy to help you. Chapter 4 is also quite an important one. The heading says business names and industry code of conduct. So what this chapter is all about, firstly, you're not going to hide. Don't try and do the business in such a way that your client cannot get hold of you, or that the client cannot, well, who's supposed to take you on because you wasn't honest, you didn't weren't truthfully. You have to be identifiable, and there's certain rules for that in the Act. And then there's also acknowledgement that a certain industry do things in a similar manner. Again, it's a longer discussion. I'm not going to waste too much time on that. But it's important to understand that it's about consistency, that everybody will be treated the same and everybody in the same industry will be treated the same. Chapter 6 and 7, enforcement of the Act and general provisions. This is a much more generalized things. The legal jargon, the legal terminologies that explain certain technical environments. Again, this is more for the lawyers. A lot of this you'll understand, but it's when you get into the real enforcement of the Act that it might be necessary to study that part. So one of those reference sections that if you are checking it, you might have to go back to the reference section to see how this law was, any other laws repealed, which law takes precedence, this one or another one, and so on. A quick word, we're almost done here, and then they will answer questions if there are any. So a quick word on the National Consumer Commission. One of the things that the Consumer Protection Act acknowledges is, remember, it looks after the welfare of the consumers. Consumers doesn't always have the resources to start a legal case against. In most cases, we don't have the resources to take on somebody. You bought a big flat screen TV and it didn't work, and you try to take it back and they say, well, tough, that one was on special. There's a no refund policy. That's the type of things that they I mean, you don't have the finances to now go and sue this shop that sold it to you. The National Consumer Commission is there to help you with that. You can contact the commission, and the commission will assist you in the process without that costing you money. If you look at the mandate of the commission, They are the primary regulator. That's your starting point. That's where you go when you as a consumer have a challenge. Please make sure you've got your ducks in a row. Don't just say, oh, they've been nasty to me. Like any other legal system, there needs to be facts on the table for them to do something about it. They can conduct investigations. They can do the dispute resolutions. Their final say is the law. So simply put, the consumer get to the point where he had enough, he cannot anymore. Instead of just shouting, where that previously under the previous legislation, the last thing we could do was shout and then shout a little bit more. Now he can go to the commission. The commission has got all the powers to evaluate, to investigate, and to implement. And whatever he implements has to stay, or has to be, is final. That's the word. It may even be, if there's other legislation and further claims from that, the decision of the commission whether you're guilty or not stands. Any other court of law might just expand on the payments or the implications, the penalties. So ask yourself, how do you make sure that you always stay on the correct side of the law? How do you make sure you're on the correct side of that line? Don't lie, be honest. It's the best recommendation I can give you for compliance to the Consumer Protection Act. Just quickly before we get to the questions, this session we discussed some of the basic principles, basic overview. Next session we will touch on some specific requirements and specific things that from a plumber's point of view might be of interest to you.